The snow fell in sheets so thick we could barely see the man ahead, and the king's order had been clear: retreat before the northern army trapped us in these frozen passes. We stumbled through drifts that reached our waists, 23 soldiers and support staff fleeing a battle lost before it began, when Brother Benedict raised his hand and we all stopped. Through the white curtain of snowfall, barely visible against the mountain's face, stood walls of dark stone, and the unmistakable shape of a bell tower rising toward the gray sky. A monastery, hidden in these desolate heights, offering sanctuary we had no right to expect, but desperately needed. My name is Thomas, and I was there that winter afternoon when survival found us in the form of ancient stones and forgotten faith. I was the chaplain among them, the priest assigned to this doomed campaign to provide spiritual comfort to soldiers who needed practical help more than prayers. I had come north with holy water and scripture, thinking devotion would be armor enough against the harsh realities of mountain warfare and winter's killing cold. If you're drawn to stories of faith tested by hardship and the unexpected grace that emerges from desperate circumstances, please subscribe. These tales from history's frozen edges deserve preservation, and your support ensures they endure for those who need their wisdom most. The monastery appeared through the snow like an answer to prayers I hadn't dared speak aloud. We had been retreating for 4 days since the king's messenger reached us with orders to abandon our position, to fall back before the northern forces could surround us. 4 days of fighting through mountain passes in conditions that killed as surely as enemy swords. We had started with 32. 9 were dead already, frozen, fallen, or simply too exhausted to continue. "What is a monastery doing here?" Captain Hugh asked, his voice rough from days of shouting orders through wind and snow. At 43, he was our commander, and the reason any of us still lived, a veteran of 2 decades of campaigns, a man who understood both warfare and survival. His face was weathered like old leather, his beard frosted white, but his eyes remained sharp and calculating. What I didn't know then was that this monastery would become more than temporary shelter, that it would transform us from a retreating military unit into something approaching a community, that the monks who dwelt in those ancient walls would teach us lessons about survival that had nothing to do with warfare, and everything to do with what it means to remain human when circumstances strip away everything except the choice of who we want to be. Brother Benedict, who had spotted the monastery first, was already moving toward it. At 55, he was technically under my authority as senior clergy, but in practice he deferred to no one except his own sense of what God required. He had spent 20 years as a military chaplain before requesting this northern assignment, and he understood soldiers in ways I never would. "Does it matter why it's here?" he called back to Captain Hugh. "It exists. It offers shelter. We take it or we die in the snow. Those are the only choices." Hugh nodded grimly and signaled the column forward. We moved as quickly as exhausted men could through deep snow, toward walls that promised protection from wind that cut like knives, and cold that was killing us by degrees. Beside me walked Elena, the company's healer, a woman of perhaps 35 whose presence with the military unit was unusual but invaluable. She had joined us in the lowlands after her village was destroyed, offering her skills in exchange for protection. Now she supported old Gareth, a veteran of 50 years who had been slowing steadily, his ancient body unable to maintain the pace that survival required. "Will they take us in?" she asked quietly, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "They're monks," I replied with more confidence than I felt. Hospitality is their sacred duty. They'll take us in. And if they don't have supplies for 23 extra people through winter? I had no answer for that. The mathematics of survival were brutal. You couldn't feed people with faith alone, couldn't warm them with prayers, couldn't make limited resources stretch beyond their capacity, no matter how pure your intentions. Young Marcus walked ahead of us, barely 20 years old, but already hardened by months of campaign. He was the company's scout, the one with eyes sharp enough to spot danger before it reached us. Now his eyes were fixed on the monastery with an intensity that spoke of hope and desperation mixed together. "Do you think they have food?" he asked, no one in particular. "Real food. Hot food. God, I can't remember the last time I was properly warm or properly fed." "4 months ago," grumbled Simon, walking beside him. Simon was our quartermaster, 40 years old and perpetually cynical about everything except the weight of supplies and the calculations of how long they would last. Back when this campaign made sense, before we marched into these frozen mountains chasing victory that never existed. "Enough," Captain Hugh said sharply. "We fight, or we retreat, or we survive, but we don't complain. Complaining changes nothing and wastes energy we can't spare." Simon fell silent, but his expression remained sour. He wasn't wrong exactly. This campaign had been doomed from the start. A political adventure undertaken by a king who didn't understand northern geography or winter's unforgiving nature. But being right didn't change our circumstances. We were here. We had to survive. Everything else was commentary. We reached the monastery's main gate as the snowfall intensified. The gate was closed, but not locked. Benedict pushed it open, and we filed into a courtyard that was pristine with fresh snow, undisturbed except by one set of footprints leading from what looked like the chapel to a building that might be living quarters. "Hello," Captain Hugh called out, his voice echoing off stone walls. "We seek shelter. We mean no harm. For a long moment, nothing. Just wind and falling snow and the sound of 23 exhausted people breathing hard." Then a door opened and a figure emerged. An elderly man in monk's robes, his face deeply lined, his movements slow but steady. "You are welcome," the monk said simply, his voice carrying surprising strength. "I am Abbot William. This is the monastery of the Sacred Mountain. We offer shelter to all who need it. Come. There is warmth. There is food. Come." His words hit us with almost physical force. Warmth, food, shelter. The 3 things we had been dreaming of for days. Several soldiers actually wept. We followed Abbot William into a large building that proved to be a refectory. A dining hall with long tables and benches and, most importantly, a massive fireplace already burning with a fire that radiated heat like heaven made tangible. We crowded around it, pushing close, desperate for warmth that we'd almost forgotten existed. "How many are here?" Captain Hugh asked, always tactical, always assessing. "Just 3, Abbot William replied calmly. "Myself, Brother Augustine, who tends our gardens and animals, and Sister Margaret, who manages our supplies and cooking. We are a small community, but we have enough to share. You will not starve or freeze while you shelter here." 3, Simon repeated, his quartermaster's mind clearly calculating. "Just 3 people maintaining a monastery this size. It was larger once," Abbot William acknowledged. 20 monks lived here at its peak, but that was 40 years ago. Time and circumstance have reduced us. Still, we maintain what we can. We preserve knowledge. We offer sanctuary. We serve God by serving those who need help, like yourselves." He looked around at our ragged company, soldiers in tattered uniforms, weapons rusted from snow and neglect, bodies thin from inadequate rations and constant exertion. "You have suffered," he observed gently, "but you have survived. That is worth honoring. Rest now, recover, and when you are ready, we will talk about what comes next." What came next, we would discover, was far more than simple recovery. It was transformation. But that night, exhausted and overwhelmed by the simple miracle of warmth and safety, we simply collapsed into sleep more complete than any we had known in months. I woke to morning light streaming through narrow windows and the smell of bread baking. Actual fresh bread, not the moldy hardtack we'd been surviving on. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then I sat up and saw the others also waking, also smelling that impossible luxury, also trying to understand that we had, somehow, found sanctuary. Sister Margaret appeared with a young girl, perhaps 10 years old, with curious eyes and a quiet demeanor. "This is Lily," Sister Margaret introduced. "My niece who came to us after her parents died. She helps with chores and is learning to read. The bread is ready. Please, eat." The meal that followed was simple but felt extravagant. Bread and cheese and a thin soup made from the preserved vegetables. We ate slowly, savoring every bite, trying not to devour everything like the starving animals we almost were. "Tell us your situation," Abbot William said as we ate, "so we understand what help you need and for how long," Captain Hugh explained concisely. "The campaign, the king's order to retreat, the mountain passes blocked by snow, our supplies exhausted, 9 dead already from cold and exhaustion, the impossibility of continuing through the mountains in winter, and the equal impossibility of turning back toward enemy territory." "So you're trapped," Abbot William summarized. "Here, in these mountains, until spring allows passage." "Yes," Hugh confirmed grimly. 4 months, probably, maybe 5, far longer than we have supplies for, far longer than we have any right to impose on your hospitality." "Hospitality is not an imposition," Abbot William replied gently. "It is a sacred duty. You are welcome to stay as long as you need, but—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "You must understand that we have limited resources. The monastery was designed for 20 residents, not 33. We can survive winter together, but only if we work together. Share labor, share resources, make collective decisions. Can you agree to this?" "We're soldiers," Simon objected. "We follow orders, not collective decisions." "Here, you are not soldiers," Abbot William corrected firmly. "Here, you are human beings seeking to survive difficult circumstances, and survival at this scale requires cooperation, not hierarchy. I am willing to shelter you, but only if you're willing to become part of our community for however long you stay. Not guests, not occupiers, participants." Captain Hugh studied the abbot for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he nodded. "Agreed. We follow your rules. We work as you direct. We contribute to collective survival. You have my word." "Good," Abbot William said with satisfaction. "Then welcome properly to the monastery of the Sacred Mountain. May your time here be one of healing, learning, and growth." What neither we nor the abbot knew then was how profoundly that simple agreement would change all of us. How soldiers trained for warfare would learn gentler arts. How a chaplain uncomfortable with faith would discover it in unexpected places. how strangers from different worlds would forge bonds that transcended the circumstances that brought them together. The first days were revelation. The monastery was larger than it appeared, built partially into the mountain itself, with rooms and passages carved from living rock. There were dormitories for sleeping, workshops for various crafts, a library with books that made my scholar's heart ache with desire, gardens protected by stone walls and clever use of the mountain's thermal warmth, even animals, goats and chickens that somehow survived at this altitude. How is this possible? I asked Brother Augustine, the gardener, as he showed me the protected growing spaces where vegetables grew year-round despite the snow surrounding us. Augustine was perhaps 60, thin and weathered, but possessing surprising strength. He moved through the monastery with the confidence of someone who knew every stone, every passage, every secret of this place. "The mountain provides," he said simply. "Hot springs beneath us warm the earth. Channels carved by monks 2 centuries ago direct heat to where it's needed. The walls block wind. The design maximizes what little sun we receive. And centuries of accumulated knowledge guide every choice we make about what to plant and when and how. This monastery has survived because it works with nature, not against it." "But 3 people can't possibly maintain all this," I protested. "You're right," Augustine agreed cheerfully. "We maintain what we must and let the rest wait. The library gets dusted twice a year, the chapel is cleaned weekly, the gardens receive daily attention. We choose our priorities and accept that we can't do everything. That's wisdom. Knowing what matters most and focusing energy there." His words resonated in ways I was still learning to understand. For years, I had tried to do everything my position required. Every prayer, every sacrament, every pastoral duty. I had exhausted myself trying to be perfect instead of being present. Augustine's acceptance of limitation felt both foreign and liberating. Over those first days, we fell into routines. Captain Hugh organized work parties to help with monastery maintenance. Young Marcus, with his sharp eyes, assisted Brother Augustine in the gardens. Elena worked with Sister Margaret in the infirmary, combining their different knowledge to create treatments neither could achieve alone. And I found myself spending hours in the library with Abbot William, learning the monastery's history, its purpose, the philosophy that guided its continued existence despite impossible circumstances. "Why stay here?" I asked one afternoon as we sorted through ancient manuscripts together. "Why remain when it's so difficult, so isolated, so pointless?" Abbot William supplied with a gentle smile. "Because isolation creates space for what matters. Because difficulty teaches what comfort never can. Because someone must preserve knowledge and offer sanctuary, and maintain faith in human goodness even when the world suggests despair. But 3 people can do more than you'd think," he interrupted. "Especially 3 people working with purpose toward clearly defined goals. We're not trying to convert anyone or build anything grand. We're simply maintaining this space so that when people need it, like yourselves, it exists. That's enough. That's more than enough." His contentment with limitation, his acceptance of a small role performed well, challenged everything I had been taught about ambition and achievement. I had always thought success meant doing more, reaching further, expanding influence. But Abbot William suggested that success might mean simply doing what you can, where you are, with what you have, and finding peace in that. 2 weeks into our stay, old Gareth died. not from violence or dramatic crisis, but simply from age and exhaustion catching up to a body that had endured more than bodies should be asked to endure. He died peacefully in sleep, surrounded by people who had come to care for him. We buried him in the monastery's small cemetery, a peaceful plot protected by walls and warmed by thermal springs, so the earth never froze completely. Abbot William led the service, his words simple but profound. Gareth lived well and died among friends. That is the most any of us can hope for. May we all live as faithfully and die as peacefully. Young Lily placed flowers on the grave, blooms she had grown in the monastery gardens specifically for this purpose, she told me later. Her small act of beauty in the face of death moved me more than any grand theological discourse could have. That night, as we gathered in the refectory for evening meal, Abbot William began a tradition that would shape the rest of our time there. Before we eat, he announced, we will share gratitudes. Each person, monk and soldier alike, will share one thing they're grateful for about someone else present. This reminds us that we are community, not just individuals sharing space. The practice felt awkward at first. Soldiers unused to expressing emotion stumbled over words. But gradually, authentically, gratitudes emerged. Young Marcus thanked Elena for treating his frostbitten toes. Elena thanked Brother Augustine for teaching her about mountain herbs. Augustine thanked Captain Hugh for organizing repairs to the chapel roof. Hugh thanked Simon for managing supplies with such care. And when it came to me, I thanked Abbot William for showing me that faith could be quiet and practical, and expressed through simple service rather than grand gestures. That is the heart of what we do here, William replied warmly. Faith made tangible through action, belief demonstrated through service. God made real not through miracles, but through the daily choice to help, to share, to care. You're learning, Thomas. Learning what I think you came north to discover, even if you didn't know you were searching. His words struck deep. Had I come north searching for something? I had thought I was simply fulfilling duty, serving as chaplain because that was my assignment. But maybe there had been a deeper current pulling me, a dissatisfaction with religion that felt performative rather than real, a hunger for faith that was lived rather than merely professed. The weeks passed. Winter deepened. The monastery became our world, the only world that mattered when outside meant death from cold. But within those walls, life flourished in ways that surprised us all. Captain Hugh, trained for warfare, discovered a gift for teaching. He began instructing young Lily in reading and mathematics, his gruff soldier's manner softening into something approaching gentleness. Watching him patiently explain concepts to an eager child revealed dimensions of his character that warfare had hidden. Simon, cynical quartermaster, found purpose in managing the monastery's stores with efficiency that honored every grain, every preserved vegetable, every resource we collectively shared. His pessimism transformed into practical realism that served communal survival. Young Marcus thrived under Brother Augustine's mentorship, learning not just gardening but the philosophy behind it, how to work with nature rather than against it, how to observe patterns and respect rhythms, how to understand that true strength comes from adaptation rather than domination. And Elena blossomed. Given space to practice her healing arts without the chaos of campaign, given Sister Margaret's knowledge to combine with her own, she became something approaching a doctor, treating ailments we hadn't realized we carried, helping bodies recover from months of abuse. But it was old Augustine's stories, told around evening fires, that most shaped our time there. Long ago, he began one night, his weathered voice filling the refectory with the cadence of practiced storytelling. This monastery was founded by a monk named Benedict, who believed that isolation and hardship were gifts rather than punishments. He came to these mountains seeking God, and found instead the truth that God is most present in difficulty, most clear when everything else is stripped away. Young Lily, sitting at his feet, asked, "Why would anyone choose hardship?" "Because ease makes us comfortable, but hardship makes us grow," Augustine replied gently. Benedict understood that humans need challenge to discover capacity, need struggle to build strength, need difficulty to develop wisdom. So he built this monastery in the harshest place he could find, not to punish those who came here, but to offer them the gift of discovering who they truly were beneath all the comforts and distractions of easier life. Did it work? I found myself asking. For 2 centuries, yes. Hundreds of monks lived here, learned here, grew here. They preserved knowledge during dark times. They offered sanctuary to travelers. They demonstrated that human community could thrive even in impossible conditions. He paused, his eyes distant. Then came plague, and war, and slow decline, until only 3 of us remain. "But you stay," Captain Hugh observed. "We stay because the work matters, because someone must maintain this place for when it's needed, because—" Augustine smiled. "Because we have learned the lesson Benedict came here to teach. That place matters less than purpose. That circumstances matter less than choices. That external conditions matter less than internal commitment to living according to what we believe is right and true and good." His words settled over us like snow accumulating. Light at first, barely noticed, but building into something substantial. We were learning, all of us, lessons we hadn't expected about what mattered and why and how to live in alignment with deeper truths than survival alone. 1 month into our stay, a crisis emerged that would test everything we were learning. A scouting party found refugees. A family of 4 who had fled the Northern Army, gotten lost in the mountains, stumbled toward the monastery more dead than alive. A father, mother, and 2 children barely older than Lily, all suffering from severe frostbite and starvation. "Can we take them in?" Captain Hugh asked Abbot William immediately. "Our supplies are already stretched thin, feeding 33. Adding 4 more creates risk," William finished. "I know, but what is the alternative? Turn away people in desperate need? Let them die while we remain comfortable? Is that who we have become?" "No," Elena said firmly before anyone else could speak. "We don't turn away people who need help. We're better than that. We've learned better than that. We take them in and we figure it out together." Her declaration was met with silence. Then, one by one, people nodded. Even Simon, the pessimistic quartermaster, agreed. "We'll manage. We'll ration more strictly. We'll hunt more aggressively in any weather break. We'll make it work." So the family was welcomed, treated, fed, given space and warmth and time to recover. And the monastery's community grew from 33 to 37. The newcomers, a family named Henriks, with parents Johann and Greta, and children Fritz and Anna, brought both challenges and gifts. The challenges were immediate: less food per person, more crowding, increased strain on limited resources. But the gifts emerged gradually. Johann was a blacksmith, and within weeks he had repaired tools we'd thought beyond saving, created new implements we desperately needed, improved systems throughout the monastery with metalworking skills none of us possessed. Greta knew textile work, and she taught several of us how to repair clothing more effectively, how to create warmer garments from available materials, how to make our limited resources last longer through skill rather than just rationing. And the children, Fritz and Anna, brought something we hadn't realized we were missing: the reminder that children represent future, hope, continuity beyond immediate circumstances. Watching them play with Lily, watching them slowly recover from trauma and begin laughing again, gave us all a sense that we were protecting something precious, something worth the sacrifices required. But the greatest gift the Henriks brought was perspective. They had fled war, lost everything, wandered lost for weeks expecting death. Their gratitude for the monastery's shelter was profound, and reminded those of us who had been there longer that what we had was miraculous, not mundane. "You complain about rationing?" Greta said one evening when Simon grumbled about portions. "You have food, you have warmth, you have safety. We had none of these for weeks. Every day we woke thinking we'd die that day. You live in paradise and don't even see it." Her words stung because they were true. We had been so focused on what we lacked that we'd stopped appreciating what we had. Greta's outsider perspective revealed our ingratitude, and the revelation was uncomfortable but necessary. 2 months into our stay, the deep winter settled in with force that made earlier cold seem mild by comparison. The temperature dropped so low that water froze inside buildings. Wind howled for days without pause. Venturing outside, even briefly, became life-threatening. We were trapped within the monastery's inner buildings, all 37 of us crowded into spaces designed for half that number. The confinement revealed tensions we'd been managing but not resolving. Some soldiers grew restless, their warrior training making them uncomfortable with passive waiting. Some civilians grew anxious, worried about supplies lasting, about what spring might bring, about whether we'd ever escape these mountains. And conflicts emerged. Arguments over space, over work assignments, over how strictly to enforce rationing, over 1,000 small irritations that confinement magnified into genuine problems. It was Sister Margaret who finally addressed it directly. "We're fracturing," she announced at evening gathering, her usually gentle voice carrying steel. "The cold is making us forget who we've chosen to be. So we fix this now." "How?" someone asked. "By remembering what matters. By choosing community over comfort. By consciously deciding, every day, to be people who deserve the gift of survival we've been given." She looked around at all of us. "Tomorrow we establish new rules. Not rules from authority, but agreements we make together, about how we share space, how we handle conflicts, how we support each other when confinement makes us want to scream. We decide collectively how to be better than the circumstances that trap us." Agreed. The agreement was unanimous. And the next day, we held what Abbot William called a chapter meeting, the entire community gathering to discuss, debate, and decide together how we would live. The discussion lasted hours. Everyone spoke. Everyone contributed ideas. And gradually, agreements emerged. We would rotate sleeping spaces so no one always got the worst locations. We would establish quiet times when those who needed solitude could find it. We would create work schedules that honored both community needs and individual capacities. We would commit to weekly gatherings where grievances could be aired constructively rather than festering destructively. Most importantly, we agreed to remember gratitude, to intentionally notice what we had rather than obsessing over what we lacked. The agreements weren't perfect. They didn't eliminate all tension, but they provided structure, gave us agency, reminded us that we had choices even in circumstances that felt choiceless. And they worked. 3 months into our stay, something remarkable happened. The deep cold broke slightly, creating a day of relative warmth. Brother Augustine organized an expedition outside the walls to gather additional firewood and check on buried supplies. I volunteered, wanting to see the world beyond the walls I'd stared at for months. Captain Hugh, young Marcus, Elena, and Johann also joined. We bundled in every warm garment we possessed and ventured into a landscape transformed by months of winter. The world was white in every direction. The snow had drifted into shapes both beautiful and otherworldly. The silence was absolute. No birds, no wind, just the crushing quiet of frozen stillness. "It's beautiful," Elena breathed, her words visible in the frigid air. "It's deadly," Hugh corrected, though not unkindly. "Beautiful and deadly together. Never forget both." We worked quickly, gathering what we could, always aware that survival depended on efficiency. But as we worked, I noticed Johann standing still, his face turned toward the mountains visible in the distance. "You all right?" I asked quietly. "I'm grateful," he replied simply, "for this, for being alive to see it, for the monastery that saved us, for people who chose to help strangers when helping cost them personally. That's—" He struggled for words. "That's what makes us human, isn't it? The choice to help even when it's hard, even when it costs us." His observation struck deep. Yes, that was exactly what made us human. Not intelligence or tool use or language, though those mattered, but the capacity to choose compassion over self-interest, to help those who can't repay us, to create community that transcends biology and circumstance. We returned to the monastery laden with wood and renewed perspective. The expedition had reminded us that outside meant death, inside meant life, and the walls we sometimes experienced as confining were actually protecting us from annihilation. That night, Abbot William told the community's story in full, how the monastery was founded, how it grew, how it declined, how it persisted. "There have been times," he admitted, "when Augustine, Margaret, and I discussed simply leaving, going to easier places, living less difficult lives. But we always chose to stay. Not because we thought we'd rebuild what was lost. Those days are gone. But because this place matters. Because offering sanctuary matters. Because preserving knowledge matters. Because demonstrating that humans can create communities based on cooperation rather than competition matters." "Was it worth it?" young Lily asked. William smiled at her. "Look around. 37 people alive who would be dead without this monastery. Knowledge preserved that would be lost. Lessons learned about community and survival and what matters most. Yes, child, it was worth it." 4 months into our stay, we faced our gravest challenge yet. Captain Hugh fell ill. Not gradually, but suddenly. One day directing work parties, the next unable to rise from bed, burning with fever that Elena's herbs couldn't reduce. "It's pneumonia," Elena diagnosed after examination. "His lungs are compromised, probably from months of breathing cold air, exposure, exhaustion. His body just couldn't sustain the damage anymore." "Will he survive?" I asked. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "He's strong, but he's also been pushed beyond what bodies should endure for too long. It's uncertain." For 3 days, Hugh's survival hung in balance. Elena and Sister Margaret tried every treatment they knew. Abbot William prayed. The rest of us waited, understanding that if Hugh died, we lost not just a good man, but our military leader, the one who had brought us this far through impossible circumstances. On the fourth day, the fever broke. Hugh would live. But his recovery was slow, and during his weeks of weakness, something remarkable happened. The community that he had led through crisis discovered we didn't need his leadership to function. We had learned to work together, to make decisions collectively, to support each other without needing someone to command us. When Hugh finally recovered enough to resume activity, he found a community that had evolved beyond military hierarchy into something more democratic and, paradoxically, more effective. "You don't need me anymore," he observed to Abbot William one evening. "We need you," William corrected gently, "but not to command, to participate, to contribute your wisdom and experience and strength. That's different than needing you to lead. And honestly, I think that's healthier. Communities led by single individuals are fragile. When the leader fails, everything fails. Communities where leadership is distributed, where everyone contributes according to capacity, where decisions emerge from collective wisdom, those are resilient. Those survive." Hugh nodded slowly. "It's strange. I've spent 20 years commanding. Now I'm learning to simply be part of something. It feels uncomfortable, but also lighter somehow. Less weight on my shoulders." "That's what community does," William replied. "Distributes weight so no one bears it alone. Shares responsibility so no one breaks under its burden. That's the lesson we've been learning here. That's what survival at this scale requires." As winter began its slow release, as days gradually lengthened, and the quality of light changed in ways subtle but unmistakable, we faced questions about what came next. "The passes will open in 2 months," Simon reported after consultation with maps and Augustine's long experience. We could leave then, return to the lowlands, report to the king, resume whatever lives we left behind. "Or," someone asked, "or we stay," Johann said quietly. "Help restore this monastery. Build something permanent here. Create a community that continues beyond this winter." The debate that followed was intense. Some wanted to leave immediately, return to families, to obligations, to lives interrupted by war and winter. Others wanted to stay. This place had become home. These people had become family. Leaving felt like abandoning something precious. "We should vote," young Lily suggested with the directness of children who haven't learned that some suggestions are too simple to work. "Everyone decides if they want to stay or go, and nobody judges anyone's choice." Her solution was so obvious that the adults were embarrassed we hadn't thought of it. So we voted. And the results were split almost perfectly. Half wanted to stay, half wanted to leave. Abbot William proposed a compromise. "Those who want to leave can leave with our blessing and sufficient supplies. Those who want to stay can stay and help rebuild. And those who are uncertain can wait and decide after seeing what spring brings. Everyone chooses freely. Everyone is supported in their choice. That is how community works." It was agreed. And over the following weeks, as spring approached and the world began to thaw, people made their choices. Captain Hugh chose to stay. "I've spent 20 years fighting wars I didn't believe in for causes I didn't understand. I'd like to spend my remaining years building something that matters. This monastery matters. I stay." Elena chose to stay. "I've found purpose here. found people who value my skills, found a place where healing means more than battlefield medicine. I'm not going back. Young Marcus chose to stay. Brother Augustine is teaching me things I never knew I wanted to learn, about patience and observation and working with nature. I'm not finished learning. I stay. But others chose to leave. Simon wanted to return to family in the lowlands. Several soldiers had wives and children waiting. Young Fritz and Anna's parents wanted to reach the settlement they'd been fleeing toward when they got lost. And I chose to stay. The chaplain, who had come north uncomfortable with faith, had found something in this monastery that felt more real than anything I'd experienced in comfortable churches. I had discovered that faith expressed through service meant more than faith expressed through ceremony. That community, built through shared struggle, created bonds deeper than any ritual. When the passes finally opened, and those leaving prepared to depart, the farewell was emotional. We had survived winter together, had become family through shared hardship. Parting felt like severing something essential, but part we did. Half the community left, walking down the mountain toward whatever futures awaited them. The rest of us, 19 people now instead of 37, remained to begin the work of not just maintaining the monastery, but rebuilding it. The years that followed brought both challenges and growth. We expanded the gardens, improved the living spaces, created workshops for various crafts, established trade relationships with distant settlements. Slowly, word spread that the monastery of the Sacred Mountain was inhabited again, was offering sanctuary again, was preserving knowledge again, and people came. Not many, but enough. Some stayed, some moved on, but all left changed by their time within those walls, by the community we had built, by the lessons we had learned about what mattered and how to live in alignment with deeper truths. I'm an old man now, perhaps 70 years old, sitting in the library where I spent so many hours with Abbot William all those years ago. William passed peacefully 5 years ago, but his legacy continues in the community he helped create. Young Marcus, no longer young, manages the gardens now with the same wisdom Brother Augustine taught him decades ago. Elena trains younger healers in arts she learned from Sister Margaret. Captain Hugh, ancient but still sharp, organizes work parties with gentle authority that commands through respect rather than rank, and I teach. Not theology from books, but wisdom from experience. Not doctrine, but lived truth. Teaching young people who come seeking sanctuary that faith means service, that community means sacrifice, that survival requires cooperation, that we're stronger together than we ever could be apart. A young person approaches me this evening, recently arrived, seeking refuge from circumstances I don't need them to explain. They ask about the monastery's history, about the winter when soldiers became monks, about the community that emerged from desperation and choice. Why did you stay? They ask. After spring came, after you could leave, what made you choose this place? I think carefully before answering. I stayed because I found something here I'd been searching for without knowing I was searching. Faith made tangible through action. Community built through shared struggle. Purpose that came from service rather than ambition. I came north as a chaplain, uncomfortable with religion. I became someone who understood that faith is less about what you believe and more about how you live. And that was enough? That was everything. The evening bell rings, calling people to gather for meal. I stand slowly, my old joints protesting, and join the community. 19 of us now from the original group, plus perhaps a dozen who have joined over the years. Not large, but sufficient. Not perfect, but committed. We gather in the refectory, much as we did that first night after stumbling through snow toward walls that saved us. Before eating, we observe the tradition Abbot William began 4 decades ago. Each person shares one thing they're grateful for about another person present. Tonight, I share that I'm grateful for everyone who chose community over comfort, cooperation over competition, staying over leaving, who proved that humans can create something beautiful even, especially, from the harshest circumstances. After the meal, I return to my room and my writing desk. I light a candle. I open the journal I've kept for 40 years. And I write, not about today. It was routine, the simple continuation of life. But about what it means. About the monastery that saved us and that we saved in return. About strangers who became family. About the choice to build rather than simply survive. I write so that others who face what we faced might understand. That survival is never just physical. That communities survive through connections, not just resources. That walls can protect without imprisoning if we choose wisely. That the deepest strength comes not from avoiding hardship, but from facing it together. The candle burns low. My hand cramps. I close the journal. Tomorrow I'll write more. Continue recording what we're building, how we're living, what we're learning. But tonight, I rest in gratitude for the journey that brought me here, for the king's order that seemed like defeat but led to salvation, for the monastery that appeared through snow like an answer to unspoken prayers, for the winter that could have killed us but instead taught us how to truly live, for the community that emerged from military hierarchy and monastic isolation into something new and beautiful and worth preserving. The retreat became arrival. The defeat became victory. The ending became beginning. And the lesson endures, that we find ourselves not through seeking comfort, but through choosing how we respond to hardship. That community isn't what saves us from difficulty, but what we create within difficulty. That faith means less what we profess and more what we practice. The monastery stands strong. The community thrives. The ancient stones shelter new generations learning old wisdom. And somewhere, I imagine, soldiers are still retreating through snow. And somewhere, monasteries are still waiting to be found. And somewhere, people are discovering that the hardest journeys lead to the most important destinations. May they find what we found. May they learn what we learned. May they understand that every retreat can become an arrival if we're brave enough to see the gift hidden within the hardship. If this story of transformation through unexpected grace and the communities we build when everything else falls away resonated with you, please subscribe. These tales of survival, not just of bodies, but of spirits, not just through winters, but through the darkness we all face, need to be preserved and shared. Your support ensures they reach others who are retreating through their own mountains, seeking their own monasteries, discovering their own capacity for faith made tangible through love and service, and the daily choice to help each other survive not just physically, but wholly. Thank you for walking with Thomas through his journey from uncomfortable chaplain to committed community member, from someone who thought faith meant doctrine to someone who understood it meant devotion expressed through service. May you find your own monastery when you're lost in the snow, and may you have the wisdom to stay when it would be easier to leave.